To begin crocheting this tree collar, you're going to want a large crochet hook. I'm using a 25mm 50 crochet hook and this big twist ribbon yarn from Joann Fabrics. You can modify this and use any jumbo yarn that you can find available to you. Just make sure that the recommended hook size on the back is the same hook size that you're using. You can modify this a little bit and use yarn that's slightly larger or smaller, but you really do want to stick with a jumbo yarn so that it's strong and sturdy enough to stand up. So to begin, we're just going to make a slip knot, and then we're going to start working on our foundation chain. So if you want to do the standard size 26-inch diameter tree collar, you're going to make a foundation chain of 52 stitches. And for this video, I'm going to do a smaller version just with 25 stitches to show you how to do it a little more quickly. So while you're working that foundation chain, just make sure you keep it plenty loose, or otherwise you kind of will run into some problems just getting that hook in because it is so big. So with that chain loose, just continue to work on your foundation chain. If you want to modify this tree collar to make it a little bit larger or smaller, you can move it, like arrange your chain in a circle and see how big it will be. But again, 26 inches, when I was looking around, that seems to be pretty much the standard size. That's the size that I made underneath my tree that you can see in the beginning of this video. So again, I'm going to modify it and just make it smaller for this, but continue along, make your chain. So the foundation chain of 52 will give us 50 stitches because our turning chain is 2 stitches. So the first row, we're actually going to work flat before we join to work in the round. So look into that third chain from the hook, and you have your front and your back loop. But the loop we're actually crocheting into is the one behind both of those right there. You can see it. We're going to do a single crochet into that loop. So again, just that third loop behind your regular chain, and a regular single crochet into that stitch, and then repeat a single crochet into that next stitch. You can see, if you lose track of where it is, just find that regular chain that's super easy to find, and then it's behind that chain. So this will just keep your bottom flat and a nice foundation for your tree collar. So continue working single crochet into each of those loops all the way across your row. I'm going to jump forward a little bit here until I'm getting closer to the end, so you can pause here if you would like to single crochet across your row and follow along. Okay, so here I am nearing the end of the row. I just have a couple stitches left, and you can see that last one's always a little bit harder to see, but if you have a little bit hanging left, you know that you have one more stitch to work, and work that final stitch. So now that we have a row behind us and our foundation chain, it's a little bit thicker and more sturdy, so you will be able to form it into a loop without worrying so much if your foundation chain is going to twist, which is nice. Again, yours will look bigger than this, but I'm making just a smaller version so that it's easier to show you on the video. So find that chain, your chain 2, your turning chain, and we're actually going to slip stitch through that chain to join our piece into one loop. And then we'll work our turning chain once more, so chain 2. And this is where the stitch gets a little bit different than regular single crochet. If you can see, we would generally work in either the front loop or the back loop of the top there. We have our little chain. But what we're going to do different for this is we're going to actually work into the stitch underneath the chain. So if you look here where I'm putting my finger, I'll show you, you have your V of your stitch underneath the chain right there. We're going to work inside that V. So that will give that knit look. Even though it is crochet, it has that V, stacked V look of knit. So it's always a little bit tight at first. Again, this is why you want to make sure you don't let it get too tight, but just a single crochet into that V. So then you can find the next V just right next to it. Again, under that chain, single crochet right there into that V, and repeat that across. You can see when you get a few more down, it gets easier and easier to see as you work. You have your V's stacked on top of your row of V's below. And it's pretty easy. You won't probably miss a stitch or anything, just how big the stitch is. So I'm going to quickly show you here how to join your yarn. This yarn in particular, it's kind of easy. Once you come to the end of a ball, just grab another ball of yarn and you're going to spread it open a little bit. Depending on the yarn you use, this could be different. You could just weave in your ends traditionally. It doesn't have to be super sturdy because you're never going to, throw this in the washing machine. So it doesn't have to be as durable as, say, a sweater or a pair of socks. But take the new strand, and put it inside that old strand of yarn. And then when we work over that in our next single crochet stitch, it will secure it right there. It will be a little bit thicker and a little bit harder to get through at first, but later when we go back through, you can just tuck any tails or any little strands that are sticking out back behind your work, and it will blend in super seamlessly and be really secure. And you also won't have any ends to weave in, which is very nice always. So there we go. It's just a little bit bulky, but no problem. Don't worry about that too much. And then continue across in each of those V's. Just make sure you're not getting it too tight, because like I said, and you can see there, it gets a little bit tough when it does get tighter. So continue across. I'm going to actually zoom forward here, so if you want to pause and finish this round, I will show you how to decrease after this. All right, coming up to the final stitch, just make sure that you don't skip any. Get that last V stitch there, and don't worry about that gap from the first row. We will weave that in at the end. So we've finished, and again we will slip stitch to join with that chain 2 space. There will be a slight seam in your work, and just put that in the back, but I don't really think it's super noticeable. So here, what we're going to do after we slip stitch, we chain 2. So the decrease that we're going to work is actually super easy for this stitch. We're just simply going to skip that first stitch that you can see right there. We have our first stitch, and then we're going to work into our second. So skip the first one, work regularly, single crochet into the second V stitch. This is going to be a decrease. It's a pretty big decrease just because of how big these stitches are. So we're only going to work this decrease every other row. So every one row straight and then one row decrease. So you can see I just skip that stitch, work one single crochet, and then super easy. We work across the rest of the round in single crochet into each of those V stitches, and that is really all there is to it. That's how your tree skirt develops. So on the next round, when you slip stitch to join, you can grab one of those chain stitches, one of those loops from your stitch below if you want to kind of help seal that hole. I didn't really notice an issue with the hole, but just depending on how tight or loose you are. So you will work 11 rows or as many as you want to make your tree collar as tall as you want. I used 11 balls of yarn. It ended up being about 1 ball of yarn per row. And then once you're finished, you will just weave in the ends. It's pretty simple to do, just right at the bottom. And then just throughout at the top, just tuck them behind and form your tree skirt so that it can stand up on its own in a circle. So weaving in this end, you just tuck it through, close off that bottom stitch where we didn't work the first row, which is pretty simple. And then just when you weave in that end, make sure it stays near the back, which is easy enough. It's not too hard of a end weaving in. So I'm going to show you where I joined over here. You can see some of those little strands are wanting to come towards the front. Just tuck those towards the back and you won't be able to see them then. Enjoy. I hope you like this tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions and be sure to subscribe if you want to see more of my work. Thanks.